After a brutal argument at my husband's family Thanksgiving dinner, the entire room turned against me. Even Daniel. Apologize, he snapped, his voice cutting through the silence. Or pack your bags and leave. So I did exactly that. My thumb hovered over send at 31,000 feet, and I thought about how strange it was that the most important decision of my life would be made in a metal tube over an ocean, next to a sleeping 4-year-old holding a toy truck like it was the only solid thing left in the world. 11 missed calls sat above the email. 11, all from Daniel. I didn't answer any of them. I read the message one more time instead. Subject line: everything Patricia asked to see. Attached: 14 files, bank statements, screenshots, a loan document, 3 years of texts, exported and dated. My name was on the from line, but for once in this marriage, I wasn't the one who needed to explain myself. I want to tell you this started that night at the table, when Daniel told me to apologize to his mother or get out. But that's not true. That was just the night it ended. What I'm about to tell you actually started 11 months earlier, on a Tuesday, in a bathroom with the fan running so nobody would hear me breathing wrong. I need you to understand that before I tell you what I did next. I met Daniel Whitfield the summer I turned 26 at a mutual friend's lake house in Sandusky. He was the kind of charming that made a room lean toward him, quick with a joke, quicker to refill your drink, the guy who remembered your coffee order after meeting you once. I was working as a compliance analyst at a regional bank in Columbus, the kind of job where you spend your whole day reading the fine print other people skip. It made me careful. It also, I would later learn, made me exactly the wrong person to lie to. We married 2 years later. Noah came 3 years after that. For a long time, I would have told you it was a good marriage. Not perfect, but good, the way most marriages are good. Imperfectly, unevenly, with more grace given than earned on both sides. Daniel's family lived 40 minutes outside Columbus, in a colonial with a wraparound porch that his mother, Patricia, treated like a stage. Patricia Whitfield had spent 31 years as a school teacher before retiring, and she ran her dinner table the way she must have run her classroom. Total control, delivered with a smile that could freeze a lake. She had never liked me. Not in the loud, obvious way some mothers-in-law don't like their sons' wives. Patricia was subtler than that. She built her disapproval out of 1,000 small cuts. A comment about my cooking, a comment about my hours at work, a comment every single Thanksgiving for 7 years about how a child needs his mother, not strangers, delivered while looking directly at me and never, not once, at her son. Daniel's brother Mark and his wife Lacey came to every holiday too, with their teenage daughter Brooke, and the four of them formed a kind of chorus. Mark laughed at the right moments. Lacey whispered behind napkins. Brooke, at 15, had learned to giggle on cue without knowing exactly what she was giggling at. She was a kid absorbing a family's rules the way kids do, by watching who got to laugh and who had to sit still and take it. I never blamed her for it. She didn't know any better yet. None of us had taught her to. And Daniel sat in the middle of all of it every year and looked at his plate. That was the pattern for 7 Thanksgivings. I want to be honest. I let it be the pattern. I told myself it was 1 dinner a year. I told myself Daniel would eventually find his spine on my behalf, and that loyalty meant waiting for him to get there in his own time. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be more convenient than true. The 8th Thanksgiving is the one that changed everything, but the warning signs had started long before that, in ways I almost missed. It started with a receipt. I was doing our taxes in February. Daniel handled the checking account, I handled the taxes, an arrangement that had worked fine for years, when I found a fidelity statement in his email forwards folder that I didn't recognize. An account with $14,200 in it. An account I had never heard of. In a marriage where we had always said we told each other everything about money. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a work retirement rollover he forgot to mention. Maybe an old account from before we met. I ran through every boring, harmless explanation I could think of, the way you do when the alternative is a thought you're not ready to have yet. I asked him about it over dinner. Casual. The way you ask about something you're hoping has an easy answer. Oh, that's old, he said, not looking up from his phone. Practically empty. I keep meaning to close it. $14,200 did not sound empty to me, but I let it go. I told myself I was being paranoid, that 7 years of marriage had earned him the benefit of the doubt, that a good wife trusts before she verifies. I even apologized for asking. I remember that specifically too, saying, sorry, I just saw it and got curious, like I was the one who'd done something that needed smoothing over. My hands were cold that whole night anyway. I remember that specifically. Sitting on the couch, unable to get warm, even with the heat on and a blanket over my knees, running the number back through my head like a song I couldn't turn off. 14,200. Practically empty. 2 sentences that didn't belong in the same conversation, and I had let them sit there anyway because the alternative was admitting I didn't fully know the man I'd built a life with. In April, my father called to ask gently when Daniel thought he'd be able to pay back the $10,000. I didn't know what he meant. For a second, I genuinely thought he had the wrong daughter, the wrong son-in-law, some crossed wire in an old man's memory. My father explained, confused that I didn't already know. Daniel had asked him for a loan the previous September, framed as a short-term bridge while a work bonus cleared. My father, who adored Daniel the way fathers sometimes adore the men who make their daughters laugh, wired it within the week. No paperwork, just trust. I told myself even then that there had to be an explanation I hadn't heard yet. Maybe Daniel meant to tell me and it slipped his mind during a stressful month. Maybe it really was going to be paid back quietly, as a surprise, before I ever had to know it existed. I built him 3 or 4 generous excuses before I even hung up the phone, because it was easier than the alternative. I confronted Daniel that night. He told me it had been a gift, not a loan, a misunderstanding. misunderstanding, he said. My father must have misremembered the conversation. He said it so smoothly, so without hesitation, that for one full minute I actually doubted my own father's memory instead of my husband's honesty. That's the part that still unsettles me most looking back, how instantly I was willing to believe the person with less evidence because he was the one standing in front of me. I called my father back. He read me the text messages. I'll pay you back by Christmas, I promise. Emily doesn't need to stress about this. I've got it handled. Dated, time-stamped, unambiguous. My stomach did something I didn't have a word for yet. Not quite nausea. More like the floor tilting a few degrees while everything on it stayed perfectly still. Daniel had told my father one thing and his mother's family narrative, the "we're doing fine, Emily just worries too much" version. Another thing entirely. Two different stories, and I was apparently not supposed to know either version accurately. That was the night I started sitting in the bathroom with the fan running. Not for a plan yet. Just to breathe somewhere Daniel couldn't watch me do it. In a room small enough that at least I could see all four walls of it at once. In June, I saw a notification flash across his phone screen while it charged on the kitchen counter. Robinhood, a trade confirmation. A number with more zeros in it than made sense for a man who told his mother every single Thanksgiving that money was tight because of Emily's daycare obsession. I didn't say anything that night. I lay next to him in the dark, listening to him breathe evenly, and told myself the same story I'd been telling myself since February, that there was a boring explanation, that I was one conversation away from feeling foolish for having doubted him at all. I almost believed it. I wanted to believe it more than I've wanted to believe almost anything. I waited until he was asleep, and then I did something I am not proud of and would do again in a heartbeat. I looked through his phone, not to snoop for its own sake, to find out if the floor I was standing on was actually there. It wasn't. He had opened a brokerage account 14 months earlier. 14 months, which meant before the fidelity statement, before my father's loan, before any of it. He had been trading, sometimes well, sometimes badly, the balance swinging by thousands of dollars a week, using money that was supposed to be going toward Noah's daycare, toward the mortgage, toward the "we're saving, we're careful" story he told at every family dinner while I nodded along like a prop in his sleigh. My stomach dropped in a way I can only describe as physical, not emotional. Nausea. Actual nausea, standing in my own kitchen at 11 at night, one hand braced flat against the counter because for a second I genuinely wasn't sure my legs would hold me upright. I remember the refrigerator humming. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should eat something and then immediately knowing I couldn't have kept it down. I put his phone back exactly where I found it. Screen dimmed, angle unchanged, the way you'd handle evidence at a scene you weren't supposed to have entered. I started taking screenshots that week, just in case. I told myself it was just in case. The same 4 words doing more and more work each time I used them, like a phrase worn thin from overuse. In August, I paid off Daniel's Chase card, $6,800, because he told me the interest was compounding and it would tank our credit before we tried to refinance the house. I pulled it from my own savings, the ones I'd built up separately from a small inheritance from my grandmother, because that's what partners do. You cover each other. 3 weeks later, I saw a new charge on that same card, $1,100, an electronics store, a date after I'd paid it off. When I asked, Daniel said it was a gift for Noah, though Noah was 4 and had no need for $4,000 in cumulative unexplained charges across 2 months. I didn't confront him about it directly that time. I just wrote the date down in a note on my phone titled, blandly, "Grocery List." Nobody checks another person's grocery list. That was the beginning of the folder, though I didn't call it a folder yet. I called it nothing. I just kept adding to it. In October, Daniel left his laptop open while he showered, and an iMessage notification slid down across the screen from his brother Mark. "Dude or wife is gonna lose it if she finds out about the account. Keep it quiet till after the holidays." There it was. Not a rumor, not my paranoia. Confirmation from his own brother that this wasn't a series of accidents or misunderstandings. It was a decision. A plan, even, of a kind. Keep her in the dark, manage the timeline, get through Thanksgiving first. I sat down on the edge of our bed and I did not cry, which surprised me. I expected to cry. Instead, I felt something colder and steadier settle into my chest, like a key turning in a lock I didn't know was there. That was the day I stopped hoping Daniel would tell me the truth on his own and started building a case instead. I met with a family law attorney the following week. Rebecca Ferris, 19 years practicing family and matrimonial law in Franklin County. A woman with a corner office and a way of looking at documents like she could see through them to the lie underneath. Her waiting room had a framed diploma from Ohio State and a small, tasteful sign that said simply, "Consultations are confidential," as if she'd learned the hard way that clients needed to be told that before they'd say anything true. "Before you say anything," she told me at that first meeting, folder unopened in front of her, pen capped, "I need you to understand something. In Ohio, financial misconduct during a marriage matters. Dissipation of marital assets, that's the legal term for what you're describing, can affect how a court divides property. But it only matters if you can prove it. Feelings don't hold up in family court. Documents do." She asked me what I already had. I told her about the fidelity statement, the loan, the brokerage account, the credit card charge. She wrote almost nothing down, just nodded, the way you'd nod at someone describing symptoms you already suspected the diagnosis for. "You have instincts," she said. "What you don't have yet is a case. Those aren't the same thing, and courts only care about the second one." So I built a case. I didn't have forensic accounting training myself, not really. Reading fine print at a bank is not the same as reconstructing someone's hidden financial life, so Rebecca connected me with Denise Alcabor, a forensic accountant with 22 years of experience, half of them spent specifically on divorce and asset tracing cases for Franklin County family courts. Our first meeting took 3 hours. Denise asked for everything. Every screenshot, every statement, every every login I could legally access, every date I could remember even approximately. She didn't react to any of it the way a friend might have. No gasping, no, I can't believe he did that. She simply took notes in a small, cramped handwriting and occasionally asked a clarifying question like, do you know the exact date the fidelity statement first appeared in his forwards folder? As though the emotional weight of the thing mattered less to her than its timestamp. Denise didn't blink at anything I brought her. She took my screenshots, my bank statements, the loan text messages from my father, the brokerage notifications, and she built what she called, without any drama in her voice at all, a financial timeline. She traced the Robinhood account back to its opening date, 14 months before I found it, 3 months before the fidelity statement I'd first noticed. She matched withdrawal patterns from our joint account to deposit dates in the brokerage account, a rhythm that repeated almost every 6 weeks, always a few $100s under whatever amount she guessed I might notice missing. She flagged $31,400 in what she termed unaccounted dissipation over 14 months, money that had left our shared life and gone somewhere Daniel had never once mentioned, while telling his own mother, at a dinner table in front of his own family, that I was the reckless one. This isn't messy, Denise told me, sliding a folder across her desk labeled with tabs I hadn't asked for. Dates, sources, running totals, each one cross-referenced to the next. Messy is when people can't prove anything. This is clean. He left a paper trail because he didn't think anyone was looking. Most people who do this eventually get sloppy because lying takes more bookkeeping than telling the truth, and eventually everybody gets tired. I renewed Noah's passport in September, before I'd even fully admitted to myself what I was preparing for. I told Daniel it was just in case, which was true in a way he didn't understand yet. I arranged quietly, through a sympathetic manager, to shift my compliance role to fully remote starting in January, the kind of arrangement that would let me live anywhere with a decent internet connection. I told Daniel nothing about that at all. By November, I had a folder, a real one, physical, plus a mirrored digital copy stored somewhere Daniel would never think to look. Bank statements, the loan texts, the brokerage screenshots, Denise's financial timeline, Rebecca's initial custody and asset guidance, in case it came to that. I had researched international custody law enough to know that taking Noah to Portugal, where my mother's family still had roots and where I held citizenship through my grandmother, was legally defensible as long as I filed the right notice and didn't attempt to hide it, which meant carefully, quietly. I had already begun that process too, with a second attorney, Marcus Reyes, who specialized in international family law and had 11 years of experience specifically in Hague Convention matters. The single biggest mistake people make, Marcus told me over a video call in early November, papers stacked neatly behind him in a way that suggested he'd had this exact conversation with other frightened women more times than either of us wanted to think about, is running first and asking questions later. If Noah's habitual residence is Ohio and you remove him without notice or agreement, you can be looking at an abduction claim under the Hague Convention, even if your reasons are good. Good reasons don't matter if the process is wrong. Courts don't get to weigh your marriage, they get to weigh your paperwork. So we did the process right, quietly but right. I filed a request for a temporary consent to travel understanding with a family mediator, framed as a holiday trip, technically true, technically incomplete. Daniel had, after all, agreed months earlier in a text message that Noah could visit my mother's family over the winter, never imagining what that casual agreement would eventually be used to support. Marcus reviewed the language on every document before I signed it, sometimes sending back a single paragraph 3 times until the wording was airtight enough to survive a challenge. It was slow, it was careful. It made the ground under my feet solid in a way nothing else in that marriage had been in over a year. You're not trying to win an argument, Marcus told me once, near the end of that process. You're trying to make sure that 6 months from now, nobody can credibly say you did anything wrong. Those are very different goals. And the second one is the only one that actually protects your son. I told no one, not my sister, not my friend Sophia, whose name I used as a cover story for the lawyer meetings. Just me, 3 professionals who did not know each other, and a plan I built one careful piece at a time, the way Denise had built her timeline, patiently, and without anyone noticing until it was finished. Which brings us back to the table. Patricia waited, as she always did, until everyone had food in front of them before she attacked. Emily, still sending Noah to daycare? A child needs his mother, not strangers. I had heard some version of this line 7 times before. This time, something in me had already changed, even though nobody at that table could see it yet. I work because I have to, I said, and because I want to. Patricia smiled the way she always smiled, like this was a game she'd never lost. There it is, always choosing yourself. Mark snorted into his wine. Lacey whispered behind her napkin. Brooke giggled, still not fully understanding what she was laughing at, still learning the family's rules by watching who got to laugh. I looked at Daniel. One word. That's all I needed from him. Even then, even after everything I already knew. I think some small, stubborn part of me was still hoping he'd choose differently than the version of him I'd been quietly documenting for 11 months. He picked up his fork instead. I pay half the mortgage, I said, steadier than I felt. I pay for daycare. I paid off Daniel's credit card last year. His fork clattered against the plate. Emily. Patricia leaned in, delighted. Keeping score again. No wonder my son looks miserable. He looks miserable, I said, because he lies to you and expects me to protect him for it. Daniel's head came up sharp. I kept going because I had 11 months of quiet behind me and it had run out of room to stay quiet any longer. Ask him why the savings account is empty. Ask him why he borrowed $10,000 from my father and never paid it back. Ask him why he tells you we're broke while he's trading stocks behind my back. The silence had a texture to it. I remember that specifically. A silence you could have cut and served arrived like the turkey. Daniel stood slow. "Apologize," he said, "or pack your bags and leave." Everyone watched me, waiting for the fold they'd all seen from me 100 times before. I looked over at Noah, asleep on the couch in the next room, toy truck still in his fist, entirely unaware that his mother was about to make the biggest decision of both their lives while he slept through it. "Okay," I said. Daniel stayed at his parents' that night to cool off, which was fine with me, because it meant no one was watching when I went home and packed 2 suitcases with the calm, unhurried efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this exact night in her head for almost a year without admitting it to herself. Noah's passport, my documents, the folder, physical copy, because some things you don't trust to the cloud alone. Cash my grandmother always told me every woman should keep hidden. The kind of advice that sounds paranoid until the exact night you need it. 2 one-way tickets to Lisbon, already purchased in October, paid for out of an account Daniel didn't know I still had access to. Every lie he had told his family, I had turned into evidence over 11 months. Every time he had made me small at that table, I had made a copy. Thanksgiving wasn't the moment Daniel gave me an ultimatum. It was the moment he handed me my exit line, and I finally had somewhere solid to land when I used it. By the time we landed, Daniel had called 11 times. I watched the screen light up against Noah's sleeping weight on my arm, and I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say to him in a phone call that hadn't already been said, more honestly, in 14 attached files. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything else that night. After 11 months of cold hands and a churning stomach, the actual moment of decision arrived, and my body, finally, didn't fight me on it. I'd spent the last hour of the flight organizing everything into one email, addressed to Patricia, copied to Mark and Lacey, because if performance was the currency that family traded in at every holiday table, then the truth deserved the same stage the lies had always gotten. I didn't reread it before I sent it. I knew if I reread it, I'd start doubting the parts that were completely, provably true, the way you second-guess yourself after a lifetime of being told your voice doesn't carry as much weight as everyone else's at the table. My thumb rested on the screen. One tap. 11 missed calls were about to become the least of what Daniel had coming. I thought about Patricia's voice. No wonder my son looks miserable. And how she was about to learn exactly why in Denise's clean, unarguable numbers and my father's dated, time-stamped texts. I took a breath. I sent it. I want to tell you it felt like triumph. It didn't. Not right away. It felt like setting down something heavy that I'd been carrying so long my arms had forgotten what it was like to be empty. Patricia called first, 4 hours after we landed, once she'd had time to open the attachments. She didn't apologize. I hadn't expected her to. What she did instead was quieter, and in its own way, more damning. She asked to speak to Daniel, and when I told her he wasn't with me, there was a long pause on the line before she said, "How much of it is true?" "All of it," I said. "Denise Okafor can walk you through every dollar if you don't believe me." Her number's in the email. Patricia did call Denise. I know because Denise told me later, in the detached, professional tone of someone reporting a fact rather than gossip. "Your mother-in-law asked me to confirm the trading account timeline." I did. She didn't ask a second question after that. Mark's response came by text. 3 days later. 4 words. Mark didn't know everything. I don't know if that was true. I never asked. Lacey never contacted me at all, which told me everything I needed to know about where her loyalties had always actually sat. Daniel, once he'd absorbed what I'd sent and who else had seen it, did not come to Lisbon. He hired his own attorney in Columbus, a fact I learned from Rebecca, who received the initial filing 3 weeks later. What followed was not dramatic. It was slow, procedural, and entirely conducted through documents. The exact terrain Daniel had never expected me to be good at, because I had spent 7 years quietly proving I was good at exactly nothing else at that dinner table. Denise's financial timeline went into the divorce filing as Exhibit C. The loan text from my father went in as Exhibit D. The credit card statements went in as Exhibit E, alongside the brokerage account records Denise had subpoenaed directly from the trading platform, records that matched her reconstruction almost to the dollar. Rebecca argued dissipation of marital assets under Ohio law, and because Denise's numbers were, in her words, clean, Daniel's attorney did not fight the asset division as hard as he might have. There was apparently a single mediation session where Daniel's own lawyer reportedly advised him, according to what Rebecca later heard secondhand, that contesting numbers this well documented would only extend the proceedings and the legal fees without changing the outcome. Daniel agreed to a settlement that accounted for the $31,400 Denise had traced, plus repayment terms for my father's $10,000, formalized this time with actual paperwork, the kind Daniel had never bothered with when it was a favor between 2 men who trusted each other. The house, which we'd bought together 6 years earlier, was sold, and the proceeds split according to a formula that weighted the dissipation against his share, a detail Rebecca had fought for specifically, and won, largely because Denise's report left so little room for the other side to argue otherwise. Marcus's careful process on the international side meant nothing about Noah's move to Portugal was contested as abduction. I had filed the right notices. I had followed the right process. The ground held. Daniel got partial custody, exercised through scheduled video calls and 2 extended visits a year, arrangements that Rebecca and Marcus both helped structure so that Noah's stability came first, ahead of anyone's wounded pride, including my own. I never heard whether Patricia apologized to Daniel for the years of pressure that had, in some twisted way, probably encouraged the lying in the first place. A boy taught his whole life that looking successful mattered more than being honest doesn't become a man who tells the truth just because he grows up and gets married. I don't think that's an excuse. I think it might be part of an explanation, though, and I've made my peace with holding both of those at once. Noah is 5 now. He goes to a small school near Cascais, 20 minutes from from the apartment my mother's cousin helped me find, and he has picked up more Portuguese in 6 months than I've managed in 26 years of visiting. I still work compliance, still remote, still reading fine print other people skip. Some habits are just who you are, not just what happened to you. I talk to Rebecca occasionally, mostly about the final custody paperwork clearing. I sent Denise a card at Christmas, which felt strange to do for a forensic accountant, but she had spent months turning my scattered fear into something clean and provable, and I don't know many other professions where that specific gift deserves a thank you card, so I sent one anyway. Daniel and I speak when Noah's schedule requires it, and only then. It is civil. It is quiet. It is, I have come to understand, the actual sound of a marriage ending correctly. Not with a scene, not with anyone screaming across a Thanksgiving table, but with documents filed in the right order, by the right people at the right time. I don't know if Daniel has told his mother, in the months since, why the savings account was empty for real, or whether he simply let the silence between them do what silences in that family always did, cover for whoever needed covering most. I know this, though. For 7 years, I sat at that table and made myself smaller because I thought smallness was the price of peace. It never was. It was just the price Patricia charged, and Daniel let her keep charging it because it cost him nothing and it cost me everything. I stopped paying it on a plane over the Atlantic, with my son asleep against my arm and a folder 11 months in the making, finally doing what I'd built it to do. I didn't need to raise my voice at that dinner table to win. I just needed finally somewhere solid to land when I told the truth. Noah still has the toy truck. It sits on his windowsill in Cascais now, facing the water, like it's waiting for something to arrive. I think some nights that it already has.